It was about 1995 or 96. I was travelling from the north of South Australia to the Barossa Valley. This was a regular trip. I was with my wife and 2 children, all of whom fell asleep as soon as we drove off in the car. Due to the amount of extended travelling we did, I developed a driving habit of picturing the next few kilometres and then checking the side roads, etc. Once one section was completed, I would concentrate on the next. This would keep me awake and alert for safe driving. I was entering a straight level stretch of road from some hills. I could see the small town ahead called Allendale North, which is basically a small stop with a hotel on the main road, which is just outside of Kapunda. Looking ahead, I could see a large group of people milling about the hotel. This interested me, as there had only ever been a couple of cars outside the hotel at any time when I had travelled through. As I got closer, I could naturally see this group in closer detail. These people were at a fair of some kind. I assumed this gathering must have been a reunion of some sort. Every person was dressed in early 1800s style, very English Victorian era dress sense. I needed to slow down, and I recall seeing a horse and buggy on my left. As I slowly drove my vehicle through the group, I noticed a boy, about 7 years old, holding onto a woman's hand who I presumed to be his mother. He watched intently as I approached and drove past. I watched him as he was close to the road. He was dressed in a navy blue sailor outfit with white frills. He had the most penetrating blue eyes. No one else seemed to notice as I travelled through the group, but his eyes did not leave me. I thought the authorities would have closed the road due to the number of people on and near the road. My wife stirred and asked where we were. I told her and suggested that we stop, at which point I looked in the rear view mirror and saw only an empty main road. About 15 years ago, I had a time slip experience, but at the time I had no idea what it was. As I came out of Central Station, Liverpool, through a passageway which led to Bold Street, I stepped off the pavement to cross the road to Waterstone's bookshop. As I stepped into the road, the whole environment changed in an instant, and a black horse-drawn hansom cab passed me, and I watched it go up the street and noticed the road was cobbled. I noticed that the women wore long dresses and bonnets, and the men were wearing top hats, very like the pictures on the Quality Street chocolates. I was totally disorientated, and a man and woman walked right past me within centimetres, and I instinctively said, "Sorry," thinking I was going to bump into them. They appeared not to even see me. Thinking I must have stumbled onto a film set, I remained on the spot and searched for the cameras, but I couldn't see any. The whole street, the shops, the people, everything was in the past. I'm useless at history and dates, but the women wore bonnets tied with big ribbons and long dresses, and there were horse-drawn carriages in the street. It took only a second or two, and I stepped backwards onto the pavement and immediately was back in the present day. There are many examples of similar stories to these which can be found online. What I find interesting about them is that they seem to have the same attributes as many ghost stories. It's like the witnesses managed to tune into some sort of recording of the past. But rather than just seeing the human players of the scene, they have tuned into the entire environment. And just like many ghost reports, the apparitions within these time slips seem totally unaware of the witness. There is another type of time slip reported. These involve actual interactions, sometimes of a physical nature. It was late August in '97. My friend Larry and I got together in Cambridge, Massachusetts at around 9 to play some lunchtime tennis. We had never played in this particular part of town before, so we drove around looking for some courts. I drove up to a policeman who was directing traffic around a small construction site on a side street and asked him where the nearest courts were. He thought for a moment, then gave us clear instructions to courts only about 2 blocks away. Following his instructions, I took a right turn into a driveway, and sure enough, right in front of us were the tennis courts. All 3 courts were occupied. It struck us both as odd that everyone was dressed in white, We both noticed a very attractive young lady wearing a white tennis dress in the far right court as she was preparing to address the serve. Still looking at the courts, we decided to wait for one to come free. I pulled my car into a small parking lot directly on my right hand side. When we got out of the car, everything we had been looking at was gone. The tennis courts were no longer there. A small field on the left was also gone. Instead, there was a cement building that we did not see when we originally pulled in. It was as if we were somewhere else. Strangely, neither of us was particularly baffled at that moment, although I felt very annoyed for some reason. We both agreed that what we had just observed was too weird, and we went off to play tennis somewhere else. Afterwards, I did some research into the area, and indeed, at one time there were tennis courts there, but they were torn down in 1954. I live in London, and it was late October 1969, and I was walking home late one Saturday night. I had to walk through an underpass which was under the busy North Circular Road. It was cold and late, and I was surprised to see about 5 kids down there collecting pennies for the guy, being as firework night on the 5th of November was soon. These kids should not have been out that late, seeing as the oldest was a girl aged about 12 years old. What shocked me were their clothes. Their attire made me think they had come straight out of the 1920s or 1930s London. Their speech could have been taken straight from a Charles Dickens novel. I heard one young boy say, "That other gent gave me a florin." At his age, there is no way he could have known what a florin was, an old English coin for the then 2 shillings. This was the late 1960s, and kids certainly didn't use words like gent anymore. Geezer or bloke perhaps, but not gent. The girl approached me saying, "Evening, sir. Penny for the guy, please, sir?" Her politeness shocked me, but I said I hadn't any money. She slid her arm through mine, and she ran her hand down my sleeve saying, "Yes you do, sir. You are a fine gent. You do have money." I assured her I hadn't, and I expected a rude mouthful, but she replied, "Okay, thank you, sir. You have a good evening, sir." I knew I had to give these kids something, so I pulled a silver 6pence from my pocket and called her. I threw her the coin, and she gave me a thank you and a beaming smile, and then I walked off into the night. A man I knew went to Wales for a holiday in a caravan with friends. He went looking at the gift shops and found a shop that had a box in the window with a nice picture of a globe on the lid. He bought it and went back to the caravan. The next day he was looking for the box but could not find it. His friend swore blind he never bought such a box in a gift shop. He went back to the shop later and found it had been closed for 20 years, but he recognised the inside, which was now all dusty, with old-fashioned counters as he remembered from the previous day. To this day, he is sure he bought that box. The next 2 short stories are an even rarer type of time slip. These witnesses claim to have slipped forward in time, the first being only a few moments into the future, but with multiple witnesses. In 2001, I was a senior in college. Late one day, I was returning to the college dorms using the local subway. I remember being in a hurry to get back because I was late for a dinner date. As I waited, I looked anxiously down the tracks anticipating the train's arrival. Suddenly, I spotted the train's lights approaching. I heard the loud rumble it made and eventually saw it rounding the corner. The next thing I recall was a waking up type of feeling. There was no train approaching, although I felt a slight breeze pass me, as if the train had just passed. A moment later, another train arrived and I stepped on board. I would have totally forgotten about the event and gone about my business if it were not for some ladies talking. One of the ladies was saying enthusiastically to the other, "I swear it disappeared." This perked my ears and I wandered over. As the arguing between the two continued, I chimed in. "Excuse me," I said. "This may sound silly, but did you just say the train disappeared?" "Yes," she exclaimed. and to her companion, "I told you so." The remainder of the ride back consisted of me and her talking about the events as we witnessed them. More people also came forward admitting that they had witnessed the same thing. I'll never forget this event for as long as I live. I had a time travelling experience in the summer of 1968 in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. I was 7 years old at the time, playing alone near the woods in my neighbourhood. I decided to take a walk in the woods to explore, like most kids do. I was walking through the thick bushes or trees for about 10 minutes, pulling leaves and branches away from my body and my face. I noticed the leaves were turning colour from green to yellow and orange while I was walking. When I finally came out of the woods, I just stood at the edge of the tree staring ahead in awe. I felt like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, coming out of her tornado-dropped house, staring at the wonder of Munchkin Land. That is how I felt looking at this futuristic type of neighbourhood that I had never seen before. It was beautiful. The roads were extremely shiny and sparkling clean. I could see the sun shining off it, modern and new looking. They were not made from black tar, but were silver and shiny. It could possibly have been metal of some sort. The houses were colourful, modern and well kept, with huge windows and different coloured roofs, mainly orange. The streetlights were different. They were straight, clear poles with an upside down clear bowl on top of the light. The cars were small and rounded. Their colours were fluorescent green with black trim around the car doors and roof. In the background, I could hear a constant humming. I did not see any people. I was only there for a few minutes, just staring. Perhaps all events in life are somehow recorded within the physical environment, and under certain circumstances can be viewed by an observer. It might be a similar process to the apparent clairvoyant skill of psychometry. This could also explain some ghost sightings. But the time slip events, which include physical interaction, if they have been correctly reported, are harder to explain. These experiences could suggest some sort of physical time travel. Time slips into the future could also be explained by the same means I've just suggested.